Okay, and if we go to my 532 page, and let's see if last week's video finally went through the pipelines and uploaded to my site. Hey, look at that. So again, if you, well, let's just say every time I teach this class, there are always students that tell me, hey, this week I'm going to be on a business trip to wherever and miss your lecture. And, you know, I understand that kind of thing. And so if you're out of town, you know, I will have the videos, the lectures, but hopefully there will still be enough people showing up for the class that I'm not lonely in here when I'm actually doing the real life lecture. Yeah, so it uploaded through my site, and great, away we go. So if we look at then today's schedule, setting up your server space. So hopefully, Thomas, you went through and checked people off for that today, etc.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple still, like I think
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. Did anybody realize that, hey, how is he going to check that I actually did connect this thing? Glitch in me, so, but we'll catch up with you soon enough. But hopefully we saw your start page. And how many of you connected and got successfully saw that index file remote? Everybody is up. A couple of people. Thomas helped you. Yeah, great. So yeah, whatever. Like I said, you know. But today what we're going to be doing is we are going to talk the building blocks of HTML, the anatomy of CSS, styling text with CSS, and our exercise is to create your first web page. So how we're going to go about this today is if you look at an open, let's just do it like this. I already had them open. But if you go and look at the building blocks of HTML, etc., we're going to talk about elements today, block versus inline, parent versus child, attributes and values, textual content, character entities, images, and links, what all those are. We are then going to talk anatomy of CSS in terms of, hey, there's 3 different types of style sheets. Inline, internal, external. What's the difference? What are we doing with these? Then the rules of using cascading style sheets, what a selector is, what a property, declaration value, so on and so forth. If I'm going through this really blazingly quick right now, it's because I'm just kind of showing you what we're going to do. Then we're going to start the exercise. And as we then go through the exercise, when we get to each one of these things, putting together the exercise, I'll shift to my lecture notes, have it up there, and kind of talk about. And we kind of be switching back and forth. Hopefully, it won't get too chaotic for everybody, because unfortunately, the unfortunate thing about doing this here in the class with the projectors like this is I have not found a way to have one projector screen have my browser and the other projector screen have code. So we might be switching back and forth. And if you need me to switch back, just let me know. Then lastly, we will be taking a look at styling text with CSS. You know, fonts, declarations, so on and so forth. And then we're also going to take a look at some other properties in CSS that I don't have actually written here in the lecture. We're going to talk about margins and paddings and widths of elements and that kind of stuff. So if you then go to the lecture page, or the exercise, sorry, creating your first web page. Put this down over here. What I've tried to give you kind of a not so step-by-step that every little nugget
where I have written out in the lecture, but step by step enough that then when we're following along in class, and if you go and watch the video again, you can follow up. So I also do have on each one of the exercise pages, I have a view link to where you can view then the front end, what we're actually going for here, the demo at this point in time, as well as a link to the code on GitHub. Okay, so you can take a look at the code on GitHub and say, hey, did I do this correctly or not? Again, please no copying and pasting, hammer it out yourself, otherwise you're just not going to learn anything, okay? That being said, there are 2 versions on my GitHub. Who does not know what GitHub is? Did I talk about it last time? GitHub is basically a website that is basically social media for code, right? And the good thing about Git project with a couple of other developers, one developer can be in Seattle, one can be in New York, one can be in Texas, one can be in Paris, right? And you guys can all work on the same project and then upload your versions of code, right? So let me show you a diagram, okay? We use GitHub in one of my classes at Seattle Central when we have 4 team members working with a client. And so the 4 team members then are working on their local environments on their own computers, uploading, pushing the code to GitHub, and then they can each sync the code with each other, meaning so actually, open that up like this. So GitHub here is the repository. So we call it a code repository. Okay? So if I have then 2 people, 2 developers that are working on code, right? Developer 1, developer 2, and this drawing was done by a student of mine at Seattle Central, Kate Lee Huson. Hopefully I'm saying her name right. She's awesome. So basically, if I'm doing code here, right, I can then push it to GitHub, and then this person can open up the repository and sync what I did and pull it to their local machine and add to it. So we can have our local environments running, and then when we want to upload it to a server to deploy, we can then deploy the latest version, right? And so we can always have the latest version up on the server, and also it then in the interface, if we go back to, let's go to this one. So I have 2 versions of this. When we first, or 2 versions of the demo exercises. When we first had this class running, it was called 598 because it was a special topic. So I made a 598 repository. Now that it's the 532 class, I have a 532 repository that then you can see last 15 stuff. But you can see that if we open the 2016 and we look at these files, right, you can see that I made comments with all the exercise names. So when we do our code today, I am going to push it to GitHub under a 2017 folder, and you'll see the comment for the exercise name, so that basically, you know, when we file here, it was when we did the contact thing, and you can take a look at the code. Does that make sense? That's the nuts and bolts of basics of what Git does, right? Or GitHub, excuse me. So I am then going to go to what we are going to be doing today is create your first web page. So we are going to create an index.html file. Ready? Let's go. Okay. So if, then how many of you are using Dreamweaver? Okay, great. How many of you are not using Dreamweaver? One person. Two people? Okay. So you can make a new file in Dreamweaver and it'll kick you out the HTML5 code. I am then going to delete that and we're going to hammer it out by hand, okay, in terms of a template. But first thing I want to do, let's say if I'm here in Dreamweaver and I have up here, I am connected to my faculty.washington.edu account that if I go out there to the interwebs, and I go faculty Washington edu, SINKUM, you'll see my 2014, 2015, 2016, and all my other demos. What I need to do now is make a 2017 folder. So if you're using Dreamweaver, you can just right-click here and create a new folder, I believe, or in your Finder level, let's say it like this. Let's do it this way. If you are in your Finder level, or what do they call it on a PC? Explorer window level? They call it Finder. What? Yeah, File Explorer. Okay. You can see that I have my HTML folder. In there, I have 2014, 15, 16, and all my other demo stuff. What I want to do here then is, so I'm going to open up this folder, and I am going to make a new folder and label it 2017. Okay. So you guys are just going to have your files at the root of your HTML folder, right? So you don't have to do that. You can just have your HTML folder and that'll be that. But now that I've done that, if I'm in Dreamweaver, I should have seen this folder show up. If it didn't show up, I can hit the synchronize, whoops, not that one, the refresh. If I open up, come on. Oh. Files. What did you do to me? Dreamweaver. This new version of Dreamweaver. Come on. Window. Properties. Files. F8. There we go. Just off the window over there. I have an extra monitor at work, and it still thinks I'm connected to my extra monitor. There should be, oh, you know, there's no refresh one anymore. So never mind that, it just refreshed. Let's go back and just dock this over here. So what I want to do is I want to create a new file. So if you are in Dreamweaver, it'll come up with create a new file, right? Take a look at over here, doc type, HTML5, okay? So let's revisit the doc type real quick. Because I know we didn't talk about it too much the other day. So if we go to the lecture from last week, the basics of HTML and CSS. Remember when I said we're up to HTML5? We had, we went from HTML4 to XHTML1 and 2, I believe, okay? We took a divergent. Did anybody ever work in HTML when it was called XH? Does anybody know what the X stands for? Yeah, but it's also, it stands for from the XML files. In other words, extensible, I think XML stands for extensible markup language, doesn't it? Where you can make a cat tag or a dog tag. You're not limited to certain tags. So XML, from what I understand, you can use it kind of more like a database structure, right? I've never used XML, but what I do know about XML is when we were in older versions of HTML, if you ever looked at older versions of HTML, you will notice, how many of you have ever seen HTML that has everything's in all caps? Anybody? Okay. Nobody's, I'm used to always somebody, yeah, oh, I remember that back in the day when I was doing it, whatever. But back in the day, when the earlier versions of HTML, we wrote code in all caps. There was also times where you could do an opening tag and you didn't have to do a closing tag, etc. Right? Well, that was just prone for errors and XHTML. So XHTML stands for Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. It was almost identical to HTML, but it was stricter and cleaner. Okay? So basically, in XHTML, then, attribute names must be in lowercase. We wrote then tags in lowercase, and attribute equals and the quotations and everything. But the one big thing about XHTML versus HTML5. Here is the doc type, okay? And then we would say in the HTML tag, we would reference w3.org, right? That was really long-winded and complicated to write. And what the doc type does is it tells the browser what version of the language you're using, okay? That we are using HTML5. HTML5 came along, and HTML5 then, if you've never used the old version of HTML or XHTML, you probably wouldn't know that then tags, elements, HTML elements, right? That in HTML5, they have a series of newer elements, like a figure tag, like an article tag, like a header tag, like a footer tag, that we didn't have in the older versions of HTML. Is this probably going to make any difference to you? Maybe if you ever come across an older version of HTML, you then have to edit. And if you are using an older version of HTML and the doc type says XHTML and you try to use an HTML5 header tag or a footer tag, it may or may not work, given that the browser HTML and maybe not interpret. I would hope that the browsers are smart enough nowadays that, oh, great, whatever, we'll still render it, but you never know. The long and the short of it is if I create a new file here in Dreamweaver, I then have the option of creating an HTML5 file, or I can go back and I can create older versions. Why would I want to create any older versions? I don't know, maybe to keep, if I'm working on a set of older code, I might want to keep the consistency, et cetera. But let's just say HTML5. I'm just going to give it a title of Mike. I am not going to attach a CSS file at this point in time. Okay? And if I say create, right, here's what it's going to do. It is going to come up and create a file, right, that then is going to have, look at the HTML5 doc type versus the older version of the doc type. which one would you rather type out, right? So the new version here, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to type it out. And if you've created the file like that, that's fine. You can keep it. For those of you that are using another code editor, which code editor are you using?
I'm just using VS Code.
Does it allow you to make a new template, and does it give you that code right there? Really? Yours doesn't? Great. So let's just kind of hammer out what we're doing and go from there. So again, doc type. I want to use the HTML5 doc type. DOCTYPE. HTML closing. Okay. So first and foremost, right, when we are writing tags, elements, etc., the opening caret and the closing caret. Okay. So here in the HTML world, then, our document needs to have an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag. Okay. So if we type out HTML, right? So basically, the HTML tag or the HTML element, however you want to call it, right? So let's go and talk of HTML. Elements, okay? You might hear me refer to them as tags. You might hear me refer to them as elements. Basically, an element are the labels that HTML uses to identify the different parts of a web page and its instructions. Elements can contain text and or be empty, right? Or an image tag element points to a source file. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It called out. Is this big enough for you guys back there? Yeah? I'm gonna bump it up just a touch. Okay. So elements can be called out by using an opening and closing tag. And in this case, I have a paragraph tag. And then I have text inside there. Okay. So what we're going to do back here then is going back to the anatomy in HTML5 document. Okay. First of all, we want our doc type. There they have it capitalized, but whatever. Then we have the HTML element or the HTML tag, the closing tag, and the ending tag. Okay, so this is where then elements can have an opening tag and a closing tag. Some elements do not. When we get to, for instance, an image tag is just one tag that then points to a source file. Let me just give you, since I'm showing you that or telling you that, let's talk about what I mean. If I go to, let's see, setting up a server space, creating our document here. If I, and here's something why I use Chrome and or Firefox and not some of the other browsers. If I right click and I say inspect, this will bring me up with the inspect palette in Chrome. How many of you have ever seen this before? Okay, great. So I use this as a developer all the time. And matter of fact, when we get to the responsive stuff, it will allow us to put it in responsive mode where we can then have a window to see what the breakpoints are. But if I then viewed source or inspected we got a pretty long image tag in there. But this image tag then only has an opening to the tag. Come on, come on, come on. My mouse is kind of tweaking out on me, sorry about that. And then over here, we have the end of it. So there is no open element inside of it closing, right? Because since it is an image tag, see this SRC right there? It then points to a PNG file. We'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? Going back here though now. So we have our opening HTML tag, we have our closing HTML tag. Inside there, we have two parts to the HTML document. Who can remember what those two parts are? Head and body. Bang. Head. Now, one of the things about Dreamweaver, and pardon me if I'm not used to 2.17, I haven't been coding in 2.17, 2017's version. I'm sure there are a lot of things different. So, but basically, our document is broken into the head portion, about the document, okay? We also then have the body portion, okay? The body portion is what actually shows up within the screen. Okay? So if I were to save this right now, I would want to save it as, if I want this file to show up when I go to the root of a domain or the root of a folder, I want to call it index, okay? So if I want to put this in my 2017 folder and save it, okay? Right now, there it is in my 2017 folder. Again, if you're using Dreamweaver, you will see in the site manager like this. Now, if I want to then publish that to the website, I will have to put it to my server. I can also, while it's still HTML and not PHP, I can actually call this file up here, right, and preview it locally. So you can see file user Zenson Kula HTML 2017 index.html, right? So while you guys are previewing your work here in class, for the time being, you might want to do it locally like that versus always having to put it FTP up to the server. However, in Dreamweaver, what was that?
So keep it in local view, like while you're building it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a local view. Now, when we get to using PHP files, PHP is a server-based language that then pre-processes from the server. It has to be on the server because PHP needs Apache, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you can use an application like MAMP as a local environment. Has anybody ever heard of MAMP or XAMPP or WAMP or any one of those local environments? Okay, where you can actually run PHP or ASP or those server-side languages locally on your machine because you have a web server environment on your machine. We're not going to get into that. No reason to get into that, okay? But here, then, if you are in Dreamweaver, well, let's just say it like this. This button right here will push or put FTP the file to my server. So right now, if I go to, I'm just going to close that file for right now. If I go back to faculty.washington, SINK, you can see that the 2017 folder is there. And if I click on it, nothing is there. In Dreamweaver, if we go to the site setup, we go to servers, we open up our site manager here, and if we go to advanced, take a look at this option, automatically upload files to server on save. So every time I save a file, it'll automatically push it, FTP it to the web. That's the option I'm going to run here. So I'm always going to look at stuff on my server. Why? I'm just used to it. This is what I do, right? So if I go back here, why is my document blank? Say it again? Correct. I don't have anything in the body. So if I typed in an H1 tag, which again, an H1 tag, H1 means headline level 1. And this is where you guys want to start typing along with me, because what you are going to do is you need to do in the body tag, right, an H1. If I save this now, it puts it up to the web for me. And if I refresh it, hey, Mike's new web page. Still though, if I look at the tab over here and it says faculty.washington.edu, right? That is a default title, right? Why is it a default title? Because I don't have a title tag in my document yet, okay? In my head, again, if you don't have your title tag in there, you want to type out title, Mike's 2017 HCDE532. The one thing with Dreamweaver is, if you notice, as soon as I start typing out the opening caret for the closing tag, right? So let's talk about opening tags, closing tags. Each element or tag, right, will have an opening. So if I have an opening title tag, opening caret, title, closing caret, right? Then the text element inside of it, Mike's 2017 532 website. Then the closing tag, notice it has caret slash, right? So each opening and closing tag has to have that type of a pair environment. The slash commonly means end, right? Ending tag, right? Or closing tag. Now in Dreamweaver, if you have an opening element or an opening tag without a closing tag and you type caret slash, it's gonna, how many of you have seen that Dreamweaver just finishes the tag off for you automatically, right? Dreamweaver allows you to kind of cheat like that a lot. It might take a little bit of getting used to. Again, I haven't coded in the 2017 version too much, so the tooltips and the closing stuff might catch me a little like, oh, that's new, oh, that's new, but we'll get through it together, okay? Now, another element that we are missing is we want to tell browsers what character encoding to use, okay? So the most common character encoding in the World Wide Web is UTF-8, okay? So we are then going to, and this tag has an opening tag, right? And then has an attribute value pair, okay? Character set equals, sorry, double quotes, UTF-8. And instead of having a closing tag, because there's no actual element inside there, there's no textual element inside the pair of tags, it's basically a tag like an image tag that just has an attribute value pair, okay? So if we go back to the lecture, close this, close that. Close that. Close this. I am notorious for having a whole bunch of tabs open. Sorry. Let's jump down to attributes and values. Okay. Now, I'd also like to say that the plugin I'm using for code on my site currently has a bug in it. So if you see in the demo code here, that character and that character, that's supposed to be the opening and closing carets, right? But for some reason, this plugin has given me a bug. I have spent hours trying to figure out the bug. I have failed, obviously, right? So it's either deal with it or go to another plugin like I'm using on another site. And if I do that, I have to go back through my website and update every code block through my website, which Thomas has not volunteered to do yet, and I wish he would. Okay, but anyway, so attributes and values. Tags or elements, a lot of times, especially if they are an element that doesn't have an opening and closing pair, they are just an element that points to, for instance, here, we have the, again, if you're watching the video at home, you're not going to see me point at the screen. I always forget that. But this SRC is called an attribute of the tag for image, IMG, right? So this is an image element. So SRC stands for source, right? And this source then has a value that looks into an images folder, into the images folder for the file picture.gif. Yay, it'll find that file and it will load it into your web page and the world is happy, okay? There are many of attributes, and we'll kind of go through them as we just go through the lectures and the exercises, okay? But a common one is the alt attribute. Can anybody tell me what that does? Say it again? What does the alt stand for? Alternative. Right. So alternative text. So, for instance, if you are using a screen reader, right, because you're vision impaired, and it gets to this image, it will read, this is my picture, aloud as the screen reader. If the image, if you turn images off, right, because, I don't know, you're just on, I don't know, an old thing from 1973 or whatever, that is just, you know, green and whatever, just a text mode. It will then, instead of the picture, it will print out the text. This is my picture. Lastly, and very importantly, the Google machine uses alt text for search engine optimization. Okay, so if and when you are putting images into your web page and you want your search engine optimization to be accurate, you should then describe, not this is my picture, but for instance, if you have tutorials on your website like I do, that you should actually describe what is going on in whatever screenshot. For instance, oops. I don't want to go to. Let's say this article here on my website, search engine optimization. If I then look at inspect here, let's see if I'm practicing what I'm preaching here. Yep. Alt, WordPress by SEO Yoast. Okay, so that may not be the most super descriptive alt attribute value in the world, but at least it's close to, that's a screenshot of the SEO Yoast plugin for WordPress, right? So that will be,
So it's like for you.
no, well,
For our other people who are, if everyone were on the same project.
it's, let's say it like this. How many of you have ever Googled something and gone to the images tab, right? So those images come up, for instance, if we,
Because they have that content.
yes, right? So for instance, if I go and say information, architecture, and I go to images,
So all of these things have that
right?
information on the picture.
Yes. So this one particular from my site, right, gets found in a couple of different ways. Let's first say it that nobody knows how the Google machine works completely, right? Because it's proprietary. But from what I can guess how the Google machine works is, and they tell you that they index alt attributes, right? They save that information so when you're doing a search, if the alt attribute is in there, it'll come up. As well, from what I can deduce, what I can see is Google will look for surrounding text. It'll look for images on certain page names, etc. So all of the above. But that's what I mean by search engine optimization. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you want to dominate the world in search engine optimization, that's one of the ways how you can do it. Okay? So anyway, getting back to the building blocks, right here. So elements then have attributes, so we're going to be using attributes quite often, especially when we get into using attributes like class and ID. Remember when we were talking about the document object model? I want to find this photo or these sets of photos, so JavaScript has to look at the document for the element that has a class of flex slider, right? Class is the attribute, flex slider is the value for that attribute. Make sense? And then we can use that in CSS as well, and we'll take a look at how to do that, okay? Let's skip down to textual content here right now, because what we are going to be doing is we're going to be writing out a whole bunch of textual content that then we are going to style here in a few minutes, okay? So textual content, the majority of the elements or the majority of content stuff on a web page, I would guess, I don't know the percentages and the averages and the statistics or whatnot, but I would guess that most of the stuff on a web page is text, right? Written content that we read, that is in a page, that then has some colors to it and whatnot, okay? So what we need to do then is write out a bunch of content. So if you're following along in my exercise, basically what we have done is you've logged into your server, you have created a new file, you've created an HTML5 file. Again, these screenshots are from, I can't remember what version of Dreamweaver. It seems like there's a new version of Dreamweaver Illustrator, what, every 6 months or so? I'm not going to go and redo all my screenshots every time, right? Because Thomas should do that. So basically, we have now created our page. We've started out with the doc type, HTML. We have our head tag. We have our meta tag, what does the meta tag stand for, do you think? What is the meta tag used for? Metadata. What's a very important piece of metadata? The meta description. Okay, so if, let's just go back to my website right here, right? I am big on search engine optimization, right? Because it feeds my ego, whatever, right? I want to dominate the world, right? And that's the way I'm choosing to try to dominate the world, okay? So if then I view page source here, I have a few different meta tags, okay? Notice I should probably put the character set down with the other ones, but whatever. Meta name description. So the meta name description tag, let me show you how that works. Again, search engine optimization. If we want to talk about 960 grid responsive, okay, we're going to use the 960 grid in this class. Say we want to make our 960 grid responsive, and we might come to this idiot's tutorial right there on premiumdw.com, this guy, right? This text right here, to convert your pixel perfect 960 grid, etc., that shows up in the Google machine, that is pulled from your meta description. That is probably one of the most important components to search engine optimization, right there. Each and every page in your website should have a keyword dense, keyword accurate meta description to be found in the Google machine, okay? But yeah, metadata. Other metadata, again, what is metadata? Well, it's data about the data is how they define it. So basically metadata is, again, data about the data, where this is the description of what the page is about. So if the page is data, this meta description is a very compact summary of that page's data. Does that make sense? Okay. Other tags then, meta name keywords, which really isn't used by the Google machine. I should probably delete that. I just haven't gotten to it. Another one is, we are going to use this down the road, meta name viewport. This tag right here is what allows this web page to be displayed correctly on your device, right? Your device has a viewport, which is different than the dots or pixels per inch, okay? So when we talk about breakpoints, we're talking about viewports. Just FYI down the road. Get rid of that. I'm doing good at closing my tabs today. A lot of times I don't do that well. But here now in our body, right, we need some text. And if we look at the demo, create your first web page, what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to have an H1 tag that has Mike's and Kula's first web page, or your name, first website, or your name, hey, I showed up for class today, whatever you want to name it, right? And then we'll have some other text elements. We'll have a header level 2. We'll have a header level 3. We will then have paragraphs. We will have an ordered list. We will have a bulleted list. We'll make something bold. We'll make something italic, and we'll put a link in there, okay? So, in the exercise, I think it's in the exercise page, there's a link here, Mike's lorem ipsum text file. I don't expect you to write out letters to the editor and that kind of stuff. You can use lorem ipsum text in this class. So with this link right here, what I've done is I've made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs of lorem ipsum that I've gotten from somewhere else. If you want to see where I got it from, lipsum.com, I believe. Okay, where you can then generate lorem ipsum to use. If you want to use Samuel L. Jackson ipsum, Snoop ipsum, I don't care, right? There, you know, if yours says for shizzle in it, what do I care, right? Use whatever lorem ipsum you want to use. Just note does everybody know what lorem ipsum text is? If you've ever done design work and you just need dummy copy, we use lorem ipsum because A, it's not readable to anybody who doesn't know Latin, right? And B, it renders like normal text, okay? So, for instance, if I'm putting together a prototype, I will, for a client, I will use lorem ipsum text to put together that prototype, okay? So, here we go. Under the H1 tag, right? And so we're going to put in our text elements, talk about them, and then we'll style them here down the road today, okay? H2. And here, instead of lorem ipsum, let's just say header level 2. Okay. Under this header level 2, let's now go and copy a paragraph. What we want to do now is put in a paragraph. Now, the only thing about my file, let's see if we might use this. Let's see how this works. So if I copy that paragraph, because see here where I get these big spaces, it's really annoying. I've noticed that a bit, yeah. Oh well. Just go in, clean it up, or is that now giving me, that just might be tabbed over for Dreamweaver 2017. Let's just leave it the way it is for now, okay? So basically, I want to put a paragraph of text in, okay? I'm going to go grab another paragraph because I want to talk about block versus inline, parent versus child, okay? So as you can tell, I now have 2 paragraph elements, right? Again, this is our markup, how we mark things up. We call it out, headline level 1, headline level 2, paragraph, right? Paragraph tags are block level elements. What does that mean? If I now go and try to find which tab I have open that has my demo that I'm looking at, right? I now have a few elements on the page. I have an H1 tag that says Mike's new web page. I have a header level 2 tag that says, or H2 that says header level 2. I have 2 paragraph tags that have lorem ipsum in them. Notice that they all sit one after the next. Okay, those are block level elements. So if we go back to, why am I keep on doing that? If we go back to the building blocks of HTML, let's move back up here. Block versus inline elements. Elements come in 2 flavors. If you haven't noticed, block and inline. Okay? So if I have paragraph tags like that, right, they are going to act like they have a hard return on them, okay? We've all done it in Word, blah, 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 return down to a new line, blah, 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 return down to a new line, okay? Those are block level elements. Then we have inline level elements, okay? Where now, if we go into here, right? Let's just say I did this, right? I went to that sentence right there, and I put a starting p tag around it, and when I went to that end of that sentence, I put a closing p tag around it, right? And I saved that and I viewed it. Again, because p tags are block level elements, it went down to a new line, okay? Versus if I undid that and I wanted to make the first line here bold, I could use a B tag for bold, but it's depreciated. It's not, you'll hear that term, depreciated. Well, what does that really mean? You shouldn't use it anymore. Well, why? Because it's depreciated. Well, what does that mean? Well, you shouldn't use it anymore. Why? It's depreciated. You'll just go round and round circles, right? Instead, I'm sure there's a better answer out there somewhere, but that's how I feel about it. Instead, if we want to make something bold, we are going to use the strong tag. See this link here? Let's take a look at what it does. Elements. Right? Tag list. That's probably what you're looking for, right? Is this what you're looking for? Kind of a chart of what all these mean? Yeah. Thomas, you want to add the tag list to that part of the page for me? Please. Yeah, so here, these are all of the tags that come with HTML5 that browsers understand and can render. So here, if we go back up, and this is a great question. B defines bold text, but don't use it because it's depreciated. Well, what does that mean? It still works, but you'll get code, I don't want to say the term Nazi, but very strict code people that will just say it's depreciated. That's not the way you do it anymore. Instead, you want to use the strong tag, which its definition is defines important text. Whatever, right? I just know that, for instance, if I'm using a content management system like WordPress, let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I am here and I want to log in, I go back to my page and I say edit page, and I'm on my creating your first web page, and I want to do this. Here it is. File, new. So here on that text, I have then hit the bold, right? And when I hit bold, instead of using the B tag, it uses the strong tag because the B tag is depreciated. And we can talk about that forever if you guys want to. I'm ready to move on from that, okay? Does that make sense though? Okay. So the strong tag then here is an inline level element, meaning I can use it in pairs inside the paragraph tag. And if I save this and go preview it, it doesn't make a new line of text. It just goes in and says, great, that is now bold or important or however you want to define it, right? Does that make sense? So block versus inline. What we've also done is, that is an example of parents and children, okay? So you will see, you could kind of think about it in terms of nested elements. We have one element that has an element inside it, which that element has another element inside it. Parent element that has two children inside of it, and those children are siblings. Meaning, if I want to use the M tag, and now that I have this page open, let's go see what the M tag is. This is what you were looking for, right? Yeah? M defines emphasized text, right? There is also the italic, the I tag, that does the similar thing, right? In other words, the EM tag, M tag, and the I tag will make the text look italic, right? By default. Notice what we're doing here is, so if I then say this part right here has an M tag around it, right? M tag, what was it, emphasis? So it's defined, defines emphasized text. Well, if we preview it, again, notice we don't have any style in our web page yet, right? So if we go back to that one poorly drawn whiteboard drawing, that I saw you scribbled in your notes, the web triangle or whatever, right? What we are currently doing is, yeah, that's a really poorly drawn whiteboard drawing, but it gets the point across, right? What we are strictly doing right now is we're worrying about our markup, okay? So as we have things marked up and we are previewing things, did I save that? Save. There it is. This is emphasized. This is bold. This is an H1. This is an H2. This is all default, right? Each browser will render elements of a web page by default, however their browser was designed to render them, right? Typically, let's see, what typeface or what font is this? I'm betting it's Times, but I may be wrong. I don't think I've ever looked up what the default text is. It doesn't even have a style. So it's Times, let's just say, or whatever serif typeface, okay? So now if we say this paragraph tag right here has this strong tag in it, the paragraph tag is the parent, the strong tag is a child, okay? I could even go and say, parent, child, grandchild, or parent, child, grandparent, right? So we can have generations of elements, if you will, right? Or if this strong tag is at the same level as this emphasis tag, this is the parent, this is the child, this child has one sibling. He's the oddball sibling, right? Let's just pretend. Who knows? Whatever. Okay? So again, tags must be properly nested with corresponding closing tags to be parents and children, right? So a lot of this is definition in terms of when I start talking about parents and children, siblings, block versus inline, those are the definitions. Make sense? All right. Moving right along. Let's go flesh out this page a little bit with now, let's do an H3, header level 3, right? I'm going to make a new paragraph tag, and I'm going to go back and I don't know, grab this paragraph down there. For another paragraph. Okay. Let's see, what do I have here? How many? I'm just going to go back and look at the demo again. Creating. Header level 2, a couple of header level 3s. Okay. Well, here's the thing. If I already wrote this header level 3 in this paragraph, I copy and paste that. Am I cheating? Not really. I'm being efficient. Okay. Type it out once. You've learned how to type out an H3 in a paragraph tag. Okay. So now what I want to do is here, I want to do, should we do ordered or unordered first? Ordered. Ordered list. Now, notice the style convention, how I'm writing things, okay? In this ordered list, right, meaning a set of list items that are numbered, okay? I then have a list item, and I'll just copy this one sentence there. I have another list item, and let's copy that sentence there. Great, now everybody knows that somebody commented on my thing. Notification. I do another list item. Notice the style or the organization of the code, right? If I have block level items, meaning both of these list items here are siblings to each other, but they are children of an ordered list, okay? So if we have block level elements like this inside of another block level element, like an ordered list, typically what we do is we put them on a new line and tab them over a little bit, okay? So that's kind of how we organize the code. And you saw Dreamweaver, now the new version of Dreamweaver automatically tabbed it over, right? So now an ordered list, if I save that and I go back and I preview, yay, we have an ordered list. Let's go down to this one and then do an unordered list. And I could, if I wanted to, start out saying UL, then go and do my list items, and then close out my UL, right? But it's kind of similar to when you guys are the programmers over here, you two, right? So it's similar to when you write out a starting curly brace, do you automatically close the curling brace so you know where you are? It's kind of the similar kind of thing. Who understood the curly brace analogy? Okay. So what I typically do then is if I have an opening tag, I automatically close it out, start out with, and then again, if I do an opening tag, I will close it out before I go and make the next one. And next week we'll get into comments, right? Because right now we have flow to our code where, right, we have our opening HTML, our closing HTML, we have our opening head, we have our closing head, we have our opening body, we have our closing body, right? And inside the body, we have our H1 or H2 or P or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really easy on the eyes to read, right? But what happens when next week we start doing layout elements and we are going to have a bunch of div tags, right? And if we have a bunch of div tags, div just stands for division, right? So in other words, if we have a header element, a navigation, a middle, we have a left column, we have a right column, we have a footer, I'm going to use div tags to lay that kind of stuff out. So has anybody ever, you probably haven't because I always ask, have you guys done this? No, that's why you're in this class, Mike, right? I'm here because I have not done this. What you don't want to do is play the game of what closing div tag is that, right? Because if you have 10 opening and closing div tags on the page, right, you're not going to know which one belongs to which. So we'll talk about comments later on down the road. But now, hey, look at that. We have our first web page. It has no styles to it. But at least we have our markup. Yay. Okay. Let's now talk about, so that's the building blocks. Let's see if character entities, images, we kind of talked about images. Oh, links. Let's talk about links. Links are the basic ingredient that will let you move from one page to the next. We can just put in a dummy link right now. So a link then uses an A tag, an href attribute, and that href attribute points to a page, which is then the value. I am going to, oh, I don't know, right there. It's too much. Let's just say that text right there. I'm going to do an A tag, starting A tag, ending A tag. Okay. A stands for anchor. Okay. So has anybody ever seen a page where you hit a link and it jumps you down to part of the page? What's happening is you are going to a named anchor link. Okay. A tag. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the href, hypertext reference, I think. Is that what it stands for, Thomas? Yeah? I don't know what a lot of things stand for. I just know they're short names, and I guess, right? I don't know if that's good or bad. But I am going to use then an href attribute with a value, and I don't know. I am then going to point it to the root of my premium DW page. Remember when we were talking about absolute versus relative? Were we talking about absolute versus relative at all? I think we kind of brought it up, okay? If what we're going to see down the road here is, if we go back here, if I have this href, right here, and it says portfolio.html, what does that mean? How does that work? Well, if I go back to last year's, right, and let's say I am on, and I have loaded the About page. And on the About page, there is a link to portfolio.php. That is a relative link, meaning if I am on the About page and there is a link to portfolio, that page is at the same root level as the About page, right? So remember when on the image source, it said images and then, so if I open the images folder and I say image graduation here, right? So if I was on the About page and then I looked into the images folder for that graduation file, right? That is a relative URL or a relative link, a relative path, if you will. Choose how you want to talk about it. Meaning, that path is relative to where I am within a website, within the file structure. Now, if I want to leave that website and go to another website, what I have to do then is use an absolute path, meaning http:///www, the domain, right? So if and when you are loading, just a side note, if and when you are ever going to load images in an email, like an email blast or whatever, we get them from the UW, whatever, we're getting tons of them, right? If an image is going to load in that email newsletter, right, it needs to find itself using an absolute path. Where does that image live on whatever server? Okay? Does that make sense? Fair enough. Go back here. All this so far, not rocket science, right? Although I bet you if you talk to a rocket scientist, they might think it's easy too. Right? I don't know. That's just my guess. So now we need to style this. Oops. Meaning, we need to give our page presentation. We need to tell it what to look like. So to do so, building blocks, we'd close that one. Anatomy of CSS. To do so, we're going to use a style sheet. Now, there are 3 different types of styles. Inline, where inside of an element, right, we can use the style attribute, say property, font family, give it a value, Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, or font size, 18 pixel, color, so on and so forth. Okay? We generally don't do this a whole lot, right, in terms of writing it directly in a file like this, okay? Because we want to separate our presentation from our markup. given the triangle file that I just closed, that picture, right? I knew I shouldn't have closed it because now I want to reference it again, but whatever. There are times, though, when inline styles like that are very, very useful. And here's one of those times. Let's go back to the completed demo here. Let's take a look at the rotating image slider. Okay. Well, how is that actually working? Right. Well, long and the short of it is JavaScript and CSS. Meaning, there is a JavaScript file again, the third point on the triangle, that then, in terms of interaction, will, did I just close the window I needed? Nope. Okay. So if then we inspect take a look at what's going on right in here in this area. Okay. See how those list items say style, width, float, and they're changing, etc. Somewhere in the inline style, so that's a version of an inline style, which that JavaScript file is writing to that list item inside the browser, right? So when it loads, this is how the interaction takes place. JavaScript can write to the screen and take away from the screen. That's basically how JavaScript works. So what it's doing is it's writing an inline style, and somewhere in that inline style, it is, maybe it's using opacity to do it. Yeah, watch the opacity. 1 is full opacity. 0 is 0 opacity. So that's how it's working, right, to shift through the slides. Does that make sense? Okay. That's the use of inline styles, right? I'm going to jump past external. We have the most common way to use a style sheet is external, meaning it's a separate file from the HTML. Okay? 5-view page source here on this page. And wait for it. And I go find my style sheet, my master style sheet. This is a file, miles long, that basically gives instructions to all the elements, right? So see where it says hashtag middle? That refers to the ID. Remember when we talk about there are attributes, classes, and IDs, right? Which we'll review here in a bit. That refers to hashtag, go find the ID of middle and give it a property of max width 940, margin 0 auto, padding 20, overflow hidden, border 2, dashed, 2 pixel, dashed, triple D, which is a very light border. Okay. For the time being, we are going to use an internal style sheet. We're not, next week, we're going to make it into an external file, But today, because we're working on just one page, right? When I'm working on just one page as kind of a template type thing or whatever, what I will typically do then is, go ahead, write it out with me here, in the head, style. Right? So we are now having an element that is a style sheet internal to our document. So this is where then, if we go back to internal. So we can then put our style sheet inside of our head tag. Or, how many of you used MySpace way back when? And you customized your MySpace page? What? You left yours normal? Well, I was in a band, and we made ours, whatever, right? But how you did it was you used a style tag, and you exploited a loophole in their application, and you put a style tag in whatever, like the body field or whatever, the text field. And it was an internal style that got read by MySpace that I don't know if they originally intended that to happen, but it happened, and that's how people exploited that glitch in their matrix, right? So while we are just doing a kind of template-y type thing, one page, I typically use an internal one, so I just have that file, and also I just need to explain what things are to you guys. So here we go. Style. Now, we also need to give this style tag an attribute. We need to let the browser know what type of file it is and for what media. Okay, so I am going to type out type text CSS. Okay. And notice I cheated. I used the Dreamweaver tooltips. Oh well, right? It's handy. It's cheating, isn't it, Thomas?
Yeah.
It's not? You don't think so? Good. Thanks for being on my side, man. All right, we've got a half an hour left, or 20 minutes left. So, text, CSS. The next thing, the next attribute we want to put in here is media. So, when we get to doing things responsively, we are going to use at media screen at this resolution or at this breakpoint do this, okay? We can also put into our style sheets media for print only, so we can have a print style sheet. We are going to say for this one, media all, print, screen, everything else. So what we want to do is we want to start giving instructions to our elements. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to create a selector, whether it's an element like a p tag, or an ID like hashtag middle, or a class dot red. Curly braces to create the declaration. And inside of there, we are going to have a property and a value. And I keep on meaning to change and update this graphic. And every time I don't do it, there's an error in this graphic. There should be a semicolon after this value. Okay? But basically, what we want to do, let's start out with body. I'm not used to the new color coding in Dreamweaver. It used to be pink for a style tag. It's gonna take me, like I said, it's going to take me a little while to get used to the new version. Let's say instead of everything being in times, right? I want everything to be in Arial. Font family. Okay. So we can go to the other page of my lecture series here. So I have the anatomy of CSS and styling text. So fonts. We have a whole lot of properties for fonts, right? Font family, font size. We can use absolute units, font size 14. We can use keyword units, small. We can use relative units. We're going to use, yeah?
The fonts that you say, if you want to put, do they have to be like within that family? I can put fonts different. Like, why is there a family?
So let's say it like this. If I do declare, I just hear things in my head and they just come out of my mouth, right? And if I say font family, Arial, Helvetica, sans serif, but I want to spell it correctly. Serif. Okay. And in my notes, I have Arial capitalized and Helvetica capitalized. Okay. So let's say it like this. Because this is, you will see Arial, Helvetica, sans serif out there. It's one of the more common ones, right? Why am I saying Arial, comma, Helvetica, comma, sans serif? 95% correct. And here's what I mean. What I'm doing here is, this is kind of legacy. Okay? Way back in the day, Macintosh licensed Helvetica. Helvetica told Microsoft, those of you that are watching this on video, I'm flipping people off right now, right? Sorry, we're all adults, right? That's okay. Okay. Microsoft, Helvetica wouldn't license itself to Microsoft, as far as I understand it. So what Microsoft did was they created a font called Arial that was really, really almost identical, 95% to Helvetica, and they got away with it. So back in the day, if I was on a PC, I would load Arial, and it would go looking into, not the browser, but it would look to see if you had Arial in your system as a pre-packaged font, or you had, has anybody ever used Suitcase or any kind of font manager where you've activated a font? Okay. If you're on a Mac, it comes pre-packaged with FontBook, where all of these are activated on my machine. Okay. If you were on a Mac, it would look for Helvetica. If you didn't have either Arial or Helvetica, it would load whatever generic sans serif you had. Okay, so that's kind of how we do things these days. So if you were to look at then, if we went to GitHub and we looked at the theme for my school website, in my body, I'm saying Arial Helvetica Sans Serif. If I want to use felt tip Roman, we're not going to do this in this class. We might if we have time to get to it. But using the app font face selector, I am loading the font felt tip Roman from a fonts folder inside my theme folder. In other words, that font is being housed on my server, right? So basically, long story short, if you are doing CSS where you are calling a font like this, it needs to load the font from the person's computer. Okay? Now, nowadays you can use the API on Google or Typekit or some of those other APIs that have a bunch of fonts that you can choose from, that you're basically loading the fonts from their server. Don't tell on me, I am using felt tip Roman illegally. I am housing it on my server and pulling it from my server, and I do not have the end user license agreement to do that. Don't black me. Okay. So now if I say that, basically I've used a selector, and in this case, I'm using a selector for a tag, the body tag. All fonts, because here's what the cascade does. Cascading style sheets. Okay? Because I've said font family Arial in the body tag, and I've saved this, and I go to my demo, now every piece of text on the page is Arial Helvetica Sans Serif. So all the other elements, all the children elements, because if we look at this, H1, H2, P, strong, etc., are children of the body tag. Okay? So therefore, the H tag, the P tag, the emphasis tag. So again, body would be parent, H1 would be child, M tag would be grandchild. Or let's say H1 is parent, M is child, body is grandparent. However you want to do the generations, right? Not all properties inherit through the cascade. Okay? As well, if I now said, okay, great, but I want all P tags font family, and I'll just pick one from this list here. Right? Now, all P tags and only P tags have changed their minds and used a different font. So what is happening is, as well as the cascade works with inheritance, anything, in other words, the P tag, the P tag selector and declaration overrides what I've declared in the body tag. Okay? But we're not going to do that. I'm going to get rid of that. So, with my selectors, I can also do something like this. H1, H2, and H3 all H tags can be the color red. Again, selector, comma, selector, comma, selector. Opening curly brace, ending curly brace, property, value. So now, all headlines are red. That looks kind of obnoxious. Let's go with six, six, six. Yeah, that gray. Let's go with the devil's gray. All right, so let's do this now. We can also do something like, well, let's say it like this. In my example on my thing, I have styles, want for styles, but let's say something like this. All paragraph tags. Let's say, and now you can see that H1, H2, H3, they all come out with their default, this browser renders them in whatever size, okay? So let's now do this. Let's say H1, font size, oops. What's going on, man? Have it selected. All right. Font size 36 pixel. Okay. This then 36 pixel is an absolute unit. Okay. We are going to use relative units down the road, percentages and m's. But for right now, let's just use a relative or an absolute unit. So here's what we're saying. I gave all H1, H2, H3 a color of 666, hashtag 666, which is a hex color, right? Which, if we go to this W3 Schools is basically encyclopedia of HTML. I would go to this website to look up things like tags and hex colors and color picker, right? Colors home, right? What are the values? So we are using hex colors, right? Or I like using hex colors, which also has an equivalent RGB, red, green, blue, and also has an equivalent keyword color to it, okay? If you noticed when I was doing a color like that, Dreamweaver, if you start typing in hex, it brings you up with color picker kind of thing. After a while, you'll sort of get to know what colors, what hex colors are which, or at least let's say it like this. If we say brand colors, we are going to down the line use branded colors. Hex B7A57A. I'm not going to memorize that as gold, but I can always look up hex colors that have an equivalent RGB, red, green, blue. CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, black, which are the printing plates, right? PMS, Pantone Matching System. Okay? That's what it stands for. Basically what we did is we did multiple declarations here, right? And then if we want to override, like if I wanted to override the color on the H1 tag, it would just go with that one. And as well, it made that 36. Okay? So based on my notes here, I'm going to fill in a couple of other values that then out, but let's do this instead of H1 there. Let's do now H2 and say font size, what do I have written in my notes? 24. And I'm not going to worry about some of the other issues here until we get to the paragraph tags, because we're kind of running out of time, right? And we need to finish things up. It won't really impact you for down the road. H3. Font size. Do I have 18 pixels? Okay. For all paragraph, what I'm going to do is all paragraph and no, not list items. I want to do margin bottom. All paragraph tags, I am then going to say font size. Wait, I can't see what I'm typing, Dreamweaver. Good job. 16 pixels. And then I'm going to give it a line height. What does line height refer to? We already talked about leading in this class. Measurement from one line of text to the next. In other words, if I said line height 300%, is that readable? No. So a common setting that I use is the 2/3 rule for body copy. (16/24). Okay. Yay. So here's what we're going to do as well. We are going to talk about margins and padding next week. Let's just talk about widths this week, or let's just say it like this. Let's go back to my notes. And what I left out? Multiple rules. Okay, we did that. Contextual selectors. Oh, that's one of the things too. So if I want to make those M tags a different color, right? I could do one of two things. I could here say all M tags red. But let's say if I only wanted M tags within the paragraph tags, it's going to then only find the M tags in the paragraph tags. Okay, so when we get to doing more complicated stuff, down the road, right? We might have stuff like this. The idea of columns inside the UL tag inside the idea of grid. Okay, so that's how we use the document object model in the CSS form, right? We kind of drill down. We didn't talk about classes or IDs today. We'll do that next week, right? So let's put it this way. Pretty straightforward so far? Great. So if you got this far, right? So when Thomas goes to grade these, here's what I expect. Because here's the thing. In the first creates thing, I went a little bit overboard and did margins and padding widths that we then in the next exercise got rid of them. So we don't need to do them and then get rid of them. We'll just talk about them next week. So basically, here you have your first web page. It's an echo. And next week, like I said, what we're going to do then is page layout, where we are then going to put things into that pink isn't showing up, is it? You'll see the grid on if you look at the lecture. But we'll start putting things into their elements and laying it out like a real web page. And then we'll go put color in it, and then we'll break it apart. And then by the end of the thing, you'll be like, I have a website. It's fun and you learn something. All right, 7:50. Any questions at all?
I want to talk about that communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just wanted to survey the class. Any of your other classes use something like Slack? Okay, so you guys are already familiar with that. You want about others?
I saw my students at Central using Slack today.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good size to try it out. We haven't done it in our previous 3 years. But basically,
What's the URL? Slack.com?
Yeah, so it's just like almost like a chat room. So the class is contained. You can share links. You could chat, right? So the idea is to replace email. So if you have questions for me, you can just plug it in there. The idea of having this, I don't want to add another app to your busy, workflow already.
Sure you do.
But if we can help,
They're master students. They can handle it.
yeah, if we can help during lecture, because I know the pace sometimes goes quickly.
Yeah.
If you have a question you want to just like plug in, I can like build it from here. If Mike suggests a link and he wants to refer back to it, I can just like post it on there as well. So we bypass the whole email thing. I think.
You can bypass me if you want. I mean, you want to. You just teach the class via Slack. I wouldn't have to show up. That'd be great.
Oh, you got YouTube.
Huh?
You got YouTube.
I know. I'm just teasing.
Yeah. So at least a few of you are on there, right? If not all. So I'm going to send out the channel then. It's just called HCDE532, and we'll see how it goes from there.
You're gonna include me on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. All right. So there you have it. If you are watching this from home, I don't know, go to the fridge and get something. See you later.